Welcome to the deep dive. Ready to go way back in time with me today?
Always up for a good time travel adventure. Where are we headed?
We're diving into the world of Neanderthals, tens of thousands of years back. I've got tons of questions, and you're the expert to help me, and our listeners, sort it all out.
Sounds fascinating. Neanderthals are definitely a group that gets a lot of attention, but not always for the right reasons.
Yeah, like everyone pictures that classic caveman hunched over dragging a club, right?
Exactly. That's the image that always comes to mind, but honestly, that's so far from the truth. As we found more evidence, and especially as dating techniques have gotten more accurate, what we know about Neanderthals has gotten a lot more complex.
Okay, so where do we even start to unravel all these misconceptions? What's the biggest myth we need to bust?
Well, their tools are a great place to start. The popular image is all about brute force, but Neanderthals were actually incredibly skilled tool makers.
Yeah.
They developed what we call the Mysterian tool industry, and it involved a pretty sophisticated technique called Levallois.
Levallois. Sounds fancy.
It was. It let them shape stones with incredible precision to make all kinds of tools for hunting, butchering, woodworking, even tools to make other tools.
So we're talking real craftsmanship here, not just banging rocks together.
Oh, absolutely. Levallois took real planning and an understanding of how to work with stone.
Yeah.
They had to picture the final tool within a larger piece of stone and then carefully chip away at it in just the right sequence. It really shows a level of cognitive ability that most people don't give them credit for.
Okay, I'm already starting to see them in a new light. What about fire? Was that as important to them as it was to early humans?
Absolutely essential. We found plenty of evidence that they weren't just using fire, they were controlling it and even making it themselves. We're talking carefully constructed hearths in their caves, some of them maintained over long periods. They clearly knew what they were doing.
So they were basically building their own fireplaces. That's amazing.
It is. And it's not just about warmth and cooking. Think about the social implications. Gathering around a fire at night, sharing stories, passing down knowledge, strengthening bonds. These were likely all part of Neanderthal life, just as they were for our own ancestors.
It really makes you see them differently. They weren't just surviving, they were forming real communities.
Exactly. And there's more. We've even found evidence that they were making birch bark tar.
Tar. What were they doing with tar?
Well, making birch bark tar is actually a multi-step process that requires a good understanding of heat and timing. It's not easy. They probably used it for things like attaching tools to handles, waterproofing, maybe even as medicine.
So Neanderthals were early chemists too. This is blowing my mind.
Right. It's a level of complexity that goes against everything we thought we knew about them.
Okay, wait, there's more. What else have we discovered about these incredible Neanderthals?
Well, get this. There's evidence they weren't even just land dwellers. They were seafaring in the Mediterranean.
Neanderthals sailing the seas. Now that's something I never would have pictured.
I know, right? It means they must have had some kind of boats and a basic understanding of navigation. It really changes how we think about their abilities and their adaptability.
Okay, so they were master tool makers, fire starters, seafarers, and glue makers. Anything else?
Well, they seem to have had some grasp of medicinal practices too. We found medicinal plants at Neanderthal sites, and some of their skeletons show signs of treated injuries, even broken bones that were set and healed.
So they weren't just tough, they were taking care of each other.
It seems so. Plus, they had some pretty smart ways of storing food. That means they were planning ahead, not just living day to day. And their cooking methods, let's just say they went way beyond just roasting meat.
From cavemen to master chefs. Who knew?
It's amazing what we're learning. Neanderthals were so much more complex than anyone ever gave them credit for.
All right, so we've established that Neanderthals were resourceful, intelligent, and really adaptable.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about their physical side. How did they compare to us physically, and how did they survive those incredibly harsh Ice Age environments?
Well, that's a great question. We'll dive into those physical adaptations right after a quick word from our sponsors.
Sounds good. We'll be right back.
So physically, Neanderthals were pretty different from modern humans. They were shorter and stockier with a much more robust build. Their skulls were a different shape too, a larger brain case, a prominent brow ridge, a sloping forehead.
And their limbs were shorter, right? I remember reading something about that.
Yeah, their limbs were proportionally shorter, and researchers think that might have been an adaptation to the cold.
Makes sense. Less surface area to lose heat from. They did live during the Ice Age, after all.
Exactly. A stockier build, shorter limbs, it all helps to conserve heat, which is super important in those kinds of environments. You see similar adaptations in other mammals that live in cold climates.
That's interesting. So, built for the cold. But what about their noses? Weren't they, like, way bigger than ours? Was that a cold adaptation, too?
That's what people used to think. The idea was that a bigger nasal cavity would warm and humidify the cold, dry air they were breathing. But actually, newer research has kind of thrown that theory out the window.
Really? So the big nose isn't as simple as we thought.
Nope. Some scientists think their larger noses might have been because they needed more oxygen, because of their active lifestyle and larger body mass. Or it could just be a random genetic thing, a variation that became common in their population.
Huh. So the big nose mystery remains unsolved.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what about their overall build?
They were strong, right? I mean, I wouldn't want to run into a Neanderthal in a dark alley.
Oh, you would definitely lose that fight.
Yeah.
Their bones were much thicker and denser than ours, which means they had powerful muscles. Plus, their skeletons show signs of a lot of injuries, which tells us they lived a very physically demanding life.
Makes sense. Hunting those Ice Age megafauna couldn't have been easy.
It definitely wasn't. Neanderthals were apex predators. They had to be to survive. They took down huge animals like mammoths, bison, reindeer, all with incredible skill. Talk about a protein-rich diet. Well, we talked about their diet earlier, and it wasn't just meat, right?
No, Neanderthals were really good at adapting to what was available. They were hunter-gatherers, so while meat was a big part of it, they ate a variety of plants, fruits, nuts, seeds, whatever they could find. And there's evidence that they even took advantage of marine resources.
Like fishing and shellfish.
Exactly. So they weren't limited to one environment or one type of food source. They could make it work wherever they ended up. Pretty impressive for a supposed caveman, huh?
Totally. Okay, so we've got a picture of Neanderthals as strong, adaptable, good at getting food. What about their social lives? Did they live in groups? Do they have families?
Well, we're finding more and more evidence that Neanderthals were a lot more social than we used to think. They lived in small groups, and we see signs of strong social bonds, especially when we look at their burial practices.
They buried their dead. I thought that was something only modern humans did.
For a long time, people thought so. But we've found Neanderthal skeletons carefully arranged in graves, sometimes in a fetal position, sometimes with their heads resting on stones, almost like pillows.
That's touching, actually. So it wasn't just about disposing of a body. They were treating their dead with care.
Yes, and in some cases, there were grave goods buried with them, things like tools, animal bones, even flowers.
Wow. So they were mourning their dead, taking care of their bodies. Maybe they even believed in an afterlife.
It's possible. Those grave goods, especially things that wouldn't have any practical use in an afterlife, definitely suggest some kind of symbolic thinking, maybe even spiritual beliefs.
So, not the unfeeling brutes we thought they were. They had complex emotions and social rituals. It makes you wonder about their communication, though. Did they have language? Could they actually talk?
Ugh, the million-dollar question. It's one that has caused a lot of debate among researchers. Anatomically, Neanderthals had a lot of what you need for speech. Their hyoid bone, which is important for tongue movement, was very similar to ours. And reconstructions of their vocal tracts show that they could probably make a pretty wide range of sounds, comparable to modern humans.
So, physically they could have spoken.
Yeah.
But were they actually using complex language?
It's hard to say for sure. I mean, we don't have recordings of their conversations, obviously. But when you look at the complexity of their tools, their cooperative hunting strategies, those social rituals we talked about, it seems like they needed more than just grunts and gestures to communicate.
Yeah, language would have been a huge advantage for survival and for passing on knowledge.
Absolutely. Some researchers even think they might have had a form of syntax, the rules that govern how you put words together in sentences, but it's still a topic of a lot of research and debate.
So maybe we'll never know exactly what a Neanderthal conversation sounded like. But it's fun to imagine them talking, telling stories around those fireplaces we talked about earlier.
It really is. And their communication might have gone beyond just spoken language. There are signs that Neanderthals might have engaged in symbolic expression, maybe even art.
You're talking about cave paintings. I thought those were all made by modern humans.
That's what people used to think, yeah. But new dating methods have turned that idea on its head. Some cave paintings, ones with abstract symbols and hand stencils, have been dated to a time before modern humans even arrived in Europe.
Wait. So Neanderthals could have been the artists. That would completely change how we think about them.
It would. And there are other clues, too. Archaeologists have found collections of unusual objects at Neanderthal sites, crystals, fossils, shells, things that don't seem to have had any practical purpose.
So they were collecting beautiful things for the sake of beauty.
It's a real possibility. It raises all sorts of questions about their cognitive abilities, their sense of aesthetics, their relationship with nature.
This is incredible. We've gone from brutish cavemen to Neanderthals as skilled toolmakers, adaptable survivors, compassionate caregivers, and now maybe even artists and deep thinkers. Our understanding has come a long way.
It really has, and I'm sure we'll continue to learn even more as new discoveries are made. But there's another layer to this story, a connection that brings Neanderthals even closer to us, and that's their interbreeding with modern humans.
Oh, right. I've always been fascinated by that. To think that we might carry a little bit of Neanderthal DNA within us. Okay, let's unpack that amazing part of the story. It really is amazing to think about. We've been exploring this whole world of Neanderthals, their skills, their culture, their complex lives. And now it turns out they're not just some ancient distant relative, but a part of us, literally in our genes.
It really is remarkable. Back in 2010, scientists mapped the whole Neanderthal genome, a huge breakthrough. And what they found was most people outside of Africa have a little bit of Neanderthal DNA, usually about 1 to 4%.
So we're all walking around with a little bit of Neanderthal inside us. That just blows my mind. How did that even happen?
Well, the most likely scenario is that when modern humans started migrating out of Africa, they ran into Neanderthals in Eurasia, maybe 50,000, 60,000 years ago. And over time, well, these two groups, closely related but still distinct, they started interacting. And sometimes they interbred.
So it wasn't always about competition. There was some mixing, some connection.
Definitely seems that way. And those ancient encounters, well, they left a mark on us. A few percent of Neanderthal DNA might not sound like much, but some of those genes have had a real impact on modern humans.
Oh, yeah. Like what traits did we inherit from our Neanderthal cousins?
Well, some of the genes we got from them actually affect our immune systems. There's one called OAS1, and it helps us fight off viruses.
So our ability to fight off infections, maybe that's thanks to our Neanderthal ancestors. That's wild.
It is, isn't it? And there are more connections. Some Neanderthal genes have been linked to variations in skin and hair color, like the BNC2 gene, which is tied to lighter skin pigmentation. And a version of the MC1R gene that's associated with red hair is found in both Neanderthal and modern human genomes.
So my freckles, could that be a little Neanderthal legacy?
Maybe. It's certainly possible. And it's not just about how we look either. Neanderthal genes have been linked to our metabolism, how we sleep, even our mood.
So a little bit of Neanderthal could be influencing how we sleep, eat, feel. That's a pretty profound connection.
It really is. And it challenges us to rethink that old idea of Neanderthals as a separate, inferior species.
They're different, yeah. But they also helped create this amazing tapestry of human diversity we see today.
It's a beautiful thought. But if they were so adaptable, if they were interbreeding with us, why did they disappear? What happened? That's a great question. And there's no easy answer. But it's probably a lot of things coming together. Climate change was a big one. The world was changing a lot back then in terms of temperature and what plants could grow where. Plus, modern humans were spreading across Eurasia, so there was more competition for resources.
So a tough time to be a Neanderthal, with the world changing and new rivals on the scene.
Exactly. And there might have been other factors too, like outbreaks of disease or even just small differences in how many babies each group was having. With a smaller population, Neanderthals were just more vulnerable to all these challenges.
It's kind of sad. They were so resourceful. They thrived for hundreds of thousands of years. And then it all came crashing down.
It is a bit of a tragic story, but their legacy lives on, not just in our genes, but in the way they've changed our understanding of human evolution.
I have to say, this has been an incredible journey. We started with that classic caveman image, and we ended up with this whole new appreciation for who Neanderthals really were. They were complex, capable, and in a lot of ways, a lot like us.
They really were, and we're still learning from them. They teach us about the resilience of our species, how interconnected life is, and that we all share a common ancestry, no matter how different we might seem.
I hope our listeners have enjoyed this deep dive as much as I have. Neanderthals weren't just a footnote in human history. They were a vibrant thread in the tapestry of our evolution. Their story is still unfolding, really. So keep asking those questions, keep exploring. That's what the deep dive is all about. Until next time, thanks for listening.